Well, thank you for everyone who's joined us today. My name is John Miller. I'm Vice President of the Americas for BioT. We're here together with our partner MedCrypt to have a conversation that's hopefully very meaningful to all of you around all the issues regarding post-market surveillance and the impact relative to medical devices and cybersecurity. And what we want to do today is we're looking to make this a webinar that'll be both strategic in context, but also practical in execution. And so what we want to do first and foremost is our hope for today is that we balance the idea of having ideas that you can think about and then tools that you can consider implementing to balance these factors that are coming at you as medical device companies. We'll cover issues that are sort of what's driving and what are now the rules and expectations associated with regulatory bodies. We'll also take a look at it and how it impacts not only the patients that you're looking to serve, but also the brand that you're looking to build. And put that in context of the things that are not only being asked in terms of context related to the regulatory bodies of total product lifecycle, but also put that in context of, okay, how do I do this from an efficient manner so actually I can build a very profitable business that can scale? And we'll balance that structure with how do we go about doing that? And part of what we're doing is bringing together MedCrypt and BioT because we do believe together we can help accelerate an end-to-end view that allows to introduce ways that you can transfer from a reactive perspective to really a proactive scenario. So with that, we built an agenda that really goes about that. Now, the agenda today, we'll first start out with some context, and then we'll jump into the how. A couple things. We will actually have time where we'll do a live demo of how we'll work between the vulnerability tooling from MedCrypt and the operational aspects of BioT. And we will have Q&A. Now, at the bottom of the webinar, just from sort of logistics, you can always ask questions during the course of the conversation. We will look to answer them at the end. We've got a lot of time. If we can get to them during, we will. And if not, we'll definitely follow up. So to help execute today, I'll moderate the panel, but we brought together people that have structure relative to the strategy that has to go with it from both a regulatory perspective, but also aspect relative to the underlying technology. Axel will help us walk through that from both a US and a European and a global perspective. And then Om and Daniel will partner up relative to talking about the platforms that come together in this regard. So just to give you a little bit of an introduction, for those of you who don't know, BioT, we're an infrastructure for medical device clouds. We've been around for a fair amount of time. We've got 40 plus customers in a wide variety of domains, and we're addressing all things associated with connected devices, be they remote, in clinic or in hospital, and the paramount elements of the platform are flexibility to configure to your particular solution, openness to be able to extend and integrate into an ecosystem, and foundationally, all the security aspects that you're being asked for, not from an architecture, but also from an operational perspective with SOC 2 Type 2 and high trust. And to do that, we bring forward a number of proven architectures that allow you to build, configure, build, and deploy a system that will not only serve the purpose of your device, but also pass all the muster related to regulatory bodies and the hospital review boards that you're ultimately going to be asked to do. The whole idea is to have a patterned way to build the cloud so you can focus on more relative things. So that's who BioT is. I'll hand off a little bit to Axel here to talk a little bit about MedCrypt and then go into the why. So Axel?
Okay, thanks, John, for the introduction, and appreciate you inviting us to this webinar, and thanks everybody for joining. Quick introduction, who we are at MedCrypt here. We focus exclusively on medical devices and medical device manufacturers and help them to bring more secure devices to market. That starts out in the concept phase where we can help establishing secure architectures and performing the required security activities to support that, provide solutions during design and development, both consultancy as well as specific technologies and tools to address, for example, PKI and cryptography. We support all of that with regulatory advisory. So as you are on your way to submit to the FDA. We can help you get ready, help you make sure that your submission is sound from a cybersecurity perspective. And then lastly, we can also help you stand up your post-market surveillance program that helps you to manage your devices in the field, identify vulnerabilities, manage your supply chain, communicate to your customers, and so forth. Next slide, please. Yeah, giving a little bit of a background, actually, why we're here and why this topic is relevant. And one more slide, please. So obviously, the medical device industry is driven by regulations. It's a highly regulated industry. It has been for a long time. And over 10 years now, we have seen evolving cybersecurity requirements for our medical devices. You rightfully, because we as patients want our devices to be cyber secure and therefore safe. FDA most recently aligned their cybersecurity requirements with Section 524B of the SD&C Act, which includes SBOM requirements, SBOM to be included in the submission to FDA, but also your commitment to post-market risk management, monitoring of cybersecurity signals, monitoring of your supply chain, and then mitigating and communicating identified vulnerabilities. And then lastly, also make sure you stay on top of your software components, end of life and end of support, and that you're in the position that you can proactively communicate that to your customers. Now, over in Europe, the regulatory landscape is more complex, and it includes regulations that impact medical device manufacturers bringing devices to market, for example, under Annex 1 of MDR, as it is detailed in MDCG 2019-16, analyzing the legal cybersecurity requirements that come out of MDR. They talk about secure by design, state-of-the-art security, lay out what that means. They're very heavy on post-market surveillance, post-market reporting. But on top of what applies to the manufacturers, we also need to look at critical infrastructure operators, such as hospitals. So the NIS2 regulation in the EU, for example, applies to hospitals and includes, for example, mandatory reporting of security incidents. And then lastly, yet another regulation, the Cyber Resilience Act, short CRA in Europe, applies to non-regulated devices. So medical devices are excluded because they're already regulated under MDR. But if you're introducing personal health devices, baby monitors, devices that are not necessarily regulated as such, CRA now has raised the bar on cybersecurity requirements, including the requirement for software bill of materials. So if you look across the world, doesn't matter, EU, US, Australia, Singapore, compliance is no longer optional, right? And the question is, how do you navigate that complexity across the globe, and how do you operationalize it so that it becomes a market enabler rather than a barrier to market entry? Next slide, please. Vulnerability monitoring and supply chain management, obviously one requirement that is very consistent across the globe and is getting more challenging over time, right? Here is a view of the last couple of years, the number of vulnerabilities published in the US National Vulnerability Database, short NVD. Right, we have seen a 20-30% range increase year over year over the last couple of years. Right now, we are running around 130 new vulnerabilities per day. And you, as a device manufacturer, are expected to stay on top of that to filter the value, the information that is relevant to you and to your customers from the noise, right? Because of those 49,000 vulnerabilities that came out in 2025, only a small portion affects you, and only a smaller portion of that section is actually security relevant and safety relevant to your devices. So again, efficiency here is key. Next slide, please. So if you look at specifically supply chain management, software bill of materials, and the processes around it, the processes required to manage vulnerabilities, there are a number of challenges. It starts with SBOM generation and the interpretation of your SBOM. SBOM tools can be highly platform dependent. Depending on your development platform, you may use a different tool that, surprise, surprise, produces different results. Regulatory requirements for tooling exceed what is traditionally required from your software development tools. If you look at FDA, for example, they require you to also track software end of support and level of support, which again, your typical software tools won't do. Data quality is a big problem. Right? You have, first of all, multiple vulnerability data sources. CVE under NVD certainly, but then also CISA, CAF, EPSS, vendor-specific sources, and so forth. And you need to look at all of them. There's no single source of truth, and you need to base your decision, excuse me, base your decision on your collective interpretation of all your sources. They all apply different objectives, different methodologies, and their data quality varies widely. But there are inconsistencies, there's noise in the data, and again, not everything applies to you. So you need to make sure that you cut the relevant information from the noise fairly effectively. Overall, you need to optimize your workflows, right? It starts with software component resolution and matching. The way your tool names a software component may be different than it is named in a vulnerability database. How do you match those two reliably? How do you reduce false positives and false negatives? Then how you interpret risk across multiple criteria. NVD, for example, gives you abstracted risk of the software component itself, but how do you translate that to your risk in your use case in your implementation in your context? Those are all challenges you need to deal with, and you need to do so efficiently. And then lastly, management and communication, right? That is internal communication across your team, but also communication to your customers. You receive new vulnerability information of a product that is in the market. First, you need to rescore that vulnerability for your use case and based on the controls you have implemented. It may be less of an issue than the initial score is, and you need to account for that. You need to document your process. You need to document when you make exceptions, and you need to document whatever you're communicating to the field. You need to provide traceability from identified risk and vulnerability all the way to implemented control and demonstrate that the control is working and mitigates the risk through testing. And all of that you need to do with very strict timelines in terms of your need to respond and your needs to communicate to your customers. Next slide, please. So added to that complexity is obviously the multitude of software stacks you're dealing with, right? You certainly have a physical device that runs software or firmware. Doesn't matter whether it's a commercial piece of software like your enterprise Linux Windows or real-time operating system, your drivers, your protocols, your network stacks, whatever you're using, all of that makes up the software on your device, and you need to deal with hundreds of components there. Then your device may connect to a cloud backend. Well, that again has its own set of complexities. The databases you're using, how do you authenticate? What do your APIs look like? How do you analyze data in your cloud backend? And again, you're dealing with hundreds of software components that make up your cloud SBOM. And then lastly, you have probably a mobile app you're supporting, a mobile app that communicates between the device and the patient, or the patient and the analytics and the cloud backend. And you have a Bluetooth stack, you have UI frameworks, data synchronization, security, cryptography, all of that. And again, you're dealing with a large number of components. So clearly, each of those stacks has its unique dependencies, its unique challenges, and it requires that you monitor continually, and that you have a tool that can unify across all of those different sources of information. Next slide, please. Yeah, and with that, I hand off to Om for a technical deep dive.
Thanks, Axel. You covered a lot of good points on complexity when it comes to regulatory requirements that have evolved over the past couple of years, as well as the technical complexity and the security posture complexity. So how can we make that easier to actually meet the cybersecurity requirements while being efficient in understanding what potential security issues might exist on your devices, and then actually update them? Next slide, please. So our end-to-end solution is combining Medcrypt and BioT's platforms to help you deliver that ease of use. Overall, Medcrypt's Helm product delivers SBOM and vulnerability management capabilities, giving you SBOM analysis, including vulnerability and end-of-life information, as well as helping you prioritize what vulnerabilities might actually impact you. It brings in information from different exploit sources and also gives you CVSS scores. And then throughout that whole process, gives you compliance documentation. So it's not an afterthought. It's something you can do with Medcrypt's platform. In the BioT platform, you get device to cloud management. You're able to get real-time fleet visibility, understand which devices might be impacted by these security issues, while also meeting a lot of the regulatory posture around over-the-air updates being secure, and you get that out of the box. So by combining Medcrypt's and BioT's platforms and capabilities, it's much easier to understand which potential security issues are not only impacting your devices, but which device specifically in the field. So without that integration, we'll go through a potential real-life scenario. There might be the next critical security issue that, for example, comes out against the latest version of OpenSSL. Typically, the question always gets asked, how do we know if we're impacted? Typically, you might be pulling in data from different security tooling, reviewing spreadsheets, or even manually trying to go look up what your dependencies are that might be vulnerable to this OpenSSL vulnerability. You might be opening up spreadsheets to not only understand which devices, but which devices in particular that are in the field are impacted. And then you're kind of guessing and working with the operational teams to figure out what hospitals or what customers or clients do we need to contact to coordinate that. That effort can take days or weeks, and sometimes even months, right? It can be really complex, time-consuming, and just inefficient. With the Helm and BioT platform, you're able to get to that answer in seconds and be able to even remediate the issue in hours. It significantly accelerates the time of understanding a vulnerability that's out there, understanding which devices are impacted by it, and then being able to use the BioT platform to do a really quick one-click update. Daniel's going to go through actually a demonstration of how, with the two platforms combined, how that's possible. So I'm going to hand it off to Daniel to take over the demo and kind of walk through a real life example of what that looks like. The demo itself, workflow, is going to kind of cover this stuff, but I think Daniel will be much easier if you just dive into the demo and just demonstrate this workflow and just show everyone what the combined platforms can offer.
Sure. So let me go directly to the demo and present you basically the steps that are shown here regarding how you ingest the SBOM data, analyze it, and then eventually manage your fleet. So let me move to the demo. That we've built together. So basically what you see over here, this is the BioT dashboard of the manufacturing portal. It's one of the tabs that we have within our platform in the manufacturing portal itself that is meant for medical device companies. And apart from managing regular devices and data flows within the system, one of the capabilities is also managing your software and firmware and devices in the field with respect to that. And what we have done with basically Medcrypt through the integration with the Helm product through both the APIs that the products of BioT and Helm introduced is basically to integrate between the BioT management system for devices and the Helm database. And let's go through the demo itself and show you basically how it works. So what you see over here is the main dashboard, where you can immediately look and see if there are any risks or vulnerability that exist in the system. You can see to which point in time it is actually updated. And one of the unique features that Helm brings to the table on top of standard vulnerability databases is that it's also correlated to other sources of information and enriched with things like what kind of exploitables are out there, because then the risk actually grows when it comes to the vulnerabilities themselves. So you can see here more specific things about what kind of major issues are available, and summary about how many devices you have in the field and how much of those are patched and monitored. And basically, in this case, we have here like different versions of software and firmware that we are managing. It's practically common that you will have different versions of devices in the field with different firmwares, and sometimes with different software versions managing them. So you can see over here a summary of the different software components we have in the field for different devices. In this case, it's a NeoKidney device, and you can see based on each firmware version or software version how many devices are related to that version in the field, and of course a summary of how many CVEs or elements, vulnerabilities are related to it, and whether it requires some updates or not. So that's as a general view. And then once you drill down a bit further, you can see exactly for each version that you have in the field, what is the status of this version from SBOM perspective? Was the SBOM uploaded recently? And here we can define also different rules, basically saying that if the SBOM was not uploaded to the system in the last 90 days, it should pop up a notification, and you should be aware of that. And if you are with an updated SBOM, then that's fine, and you can continue and work as usual. And of course, if you have a missing SBOM, that normally happens when you just upload the new firmware, then you need to make sure to upload the new SBOM. And basically, again, you can see how many devices are in the field that are impacted from it, and we'll see shortly what kind of, where are the devices located, and more of a drill down around that. And the vulnerabilities that are in high level, of course, that are attached to this firmware, and they can be critical, high vulnerabilities, medium, and low. And again, also here, based on the standards that you need to comply with, there are methods or aspects of how quick you need to fix the vulnerability and update and have a patch in the field. And if not, and of course, as Axel mentioned earlier, if you know that that vulnerability is not relevant for you, you can of course modify the risks and update the database accordingly. So that's just as an initial view of what's going on with the system. And now let's go and do two things. Let's basically upload a new version for SBOM version to 2.1.6. So what I'll do, I'll go to the upload of an SBOM. I'll choose a file. I'll take the already prepared SBOM file that I have for version of firmware 2.1.6. I'll basically attach it to the relevant version in my database, and we'll do the upload. Now it's being uploaded to the platform. And once I have this SBOM uploaded to the platform, I can start working with it. So the next thing I'll do, as you can see over here, I have now 5 versions. 3 of them are with vulnerabilities and should be updated. And 2 others are fine, but you can see they were not scanned yet. What does it mean? Basically, what I'll do right now, I'll start my synchronization with the Helm system, and basically I run a vulnerability scan. So once I'm pressing the vulnerability scan, I'll choose which versions I want to scan. In order not to overwhelm the system, I'll only choose 2 systems to scan right now. You'll see it in a second. And the scanning starts. And basically now we are communicating with Helm. And you will see here in a second that the situation will change. You can see that version 2.1.5 has 1 medium vulnerability. And there were no vulnerabilities detected for version 2.126. So basically, that's how I manage the firmwares and software components that I have in the system, how I upload them easily to the platform, how I sync with the Helm in order to identify vulnerabilities. And as you can see, as we mentioned, not only the vulnerabilities themselves, but also exploits around them. And then if I want to go to the next level, I can drill down and see exactly all the devices they have in the field, where they are located, who is the customer, what is their status. And of course, also here, I can basically decide to focus on the ones that are more critical and decide what to do with them. I'll pause you for a second. Om, you want to add something, or we're good to go?
No, you've covered a good amount of this. To reiterate kind of what you were saying earlier, the data being pulled from Helm is giving you like basically live vulnerability data on what's potential vulnerabilities are impacting the contents of the data that was in your SBOM, as well as exploitability data and potential patches for those exploits. So by bringing that information in directly into the BioT platform, we're able to get this like single place to kind of understand which devices are impacted, and I think and this will help users more easily kind of combine the 2 different problem areas of understanding what devices are impacted, why, what's the severity of that impact. Like, for example, this top vulnerability, right? It's a high severity score, but it also has an active exploit and is on the SysAkev list. So from a regulatory perspective, right, regulators like the FDA actually ask device manufacturers to not only monitor vulnerabilities that might be impacting them, but also to monitor exploit sources like SysAkev and make sure that vulnerabilities that are on the SysAkev list that have known exploits, right, are also assessed for risk and remediated.
Thanks. So once I do that, and I already know what is the status of my firmwares and software in the field, and I understand the impact of the different vulnerabilities, and I can also, of course, open and modify them and update them according to my situation and condition. Then I can move to the second or to the next phase, which is basically applying the patches, the deployments. I basically went back to my R&D team. We fixed all the vulnerabilities or the critical ones. And then we have new firmware updates to deploy, like the version 2.1.6 that you've seen. So what I can do right now, I'll take the version of 2.1.2 and 2.1.3, and I basically start an upgrade of those devices in the field. So you can see over here, I'll go one step back. We have 8 devices in the field with an old version 2.1.2, and then 12 more of version 2.1.3. And basically what I'll do right now, I'll apply the upgrade from 2.1.2 and 2.1.3 to 2.1.6, which is the latest one that we have, and what kind of fixes we have over here, and start the upgrade. And basically now we are progressing with the upgrade and validating that all the devices in the field were upgraded properly. And once that's done, of course, you will see that we have no longer devices of version 2.1.2 in the field, and slowly won't have anyone from 2.1.3. So we'll be in a much better situation with our platform. And basically, once that's finished, you can actually get an automatic report saying exactly what was done, how many devices were updated, and what kind of remediation were made. You can send this update forward and basically finalize the process. So that's a very brief overview of the BioT and Helm integration. Now, once you go to the main screen, you will see that you don't have any more devices impacted by the old version. So you're fine with that. You still need to handle version 2.1.4, run vulnerability and see where you stand, and take it to the next step. So you have here an ongoing dashboard that you can manage and work on to manage your SBOM and vulnerabilities. So with that, I think we are finished with the demo. Om, you want to add something on your end?
No, you covered it all, right? You demonstrated how easy it can be with the combined platforms to actually identify security issues like vulnerabilities that might be on the device, and then not just remediate them or do risk assessments, but actually patch the devices in the field, which is super critical and oftentimes a difficult thing to actually execute operationally.
Great. Okay. So with that, I'll hand it back to John. Let me stop my screen.
Yeah, let me share my screen here for a second, guys, because I think it might be important. Can you guys see my screen? All right,
Yeah.
I assume you see. Okay. So once again, the big thing we wanted to do in the demo, in the webinar, was really sort of set that context for post-market surveillance, specifically as it relates to the broader issues, but also SBOM and how we bring these things together with one, a complex landscape, which most devices are. And then the idea is if we can introduce some automation, not only adds efficiency, but potentially a proactive niche, and also how we're trying to bring these platforms together. I think one thing that's important to step back to is the idea is part of what we liked about this relationship is we know what we do and MedCrypt knows what they do. And once again, I think in the landscape of partners and vendors that you have, people that say they can do everything need to basically realize it's a complex world. So the big thing we're doing is trying to work out the ways in which you work with a best-in-class vulnerability and intelligence platform, combining that with the idea that aspects of how you manage and have the right posture in post-market. Now, the reality is BioT does a lot more than that, and MedCrypt as a company does as well. But the idea is when you get down to this brass tacks, how you actually manage a fleet of connected devices, that you make sure that you have the proper regulatory posture, but also everything associates there. But also, we don't want this to be a complete, manual effort to integrate the systems, which is why we're going through the idea not only of the partnership, but how we can make these two platforms work together. So that's really what drove the partnership and the work that we were showing in the solution. So the idea on the flow, right, was do all this so you can actually introduce some automation and you can have your teams work on much more strategic aspects. Okay. We're ahead of schedule, which is always good in a webinar because we can give you a little time to get a sandwich, but maybe there were a couple of questions, and maybe first and foremost, let me throw this to Axel and to Om. Feel free to whomever wants to do it. One of the questions that came up was what is the role relative of MedCrypt, or how is MedCrypt involved in the full cybersecurity needs relating to the medical device, anything like risk assessments, et cetera. So can you talk a little bit about kind of your broader, how you typically get involved with medical device companies when they're looking at everything associated with cybersecurity?
So I can start with that, and Om already answered in part of it in the chat, but we basically support manufacturers through the entire development process of devices through market introduction, post-market management, help you to set up your relevant security processes, your secure development lifecycle, your risk assessment, your threat modeling, your vulnerability and SBOM processes, and so forth. We do that in part with expertise we bring to the table, combined with templates we can offer for certain processes that are pretty much standard across all of the FDA, that make it then easier for you to implement set processes. We help you get ready for FDA, and we stay with you until you get market approval, and then also can support you in cases where you may receive questions back from FDA, including rejection that may happen for cybersecurity reasons.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think, from the BioT side, one of the things is obviously we're not in the world of consulting relative to kind of your risk exposure, but what we're trying to do is reduce your risk exposure. Part of that is by having a really documented platform that's built to the standards that you're going to be asked and all of the processes. So we have a very, very well-defined DHF with all the aspects associated with it, and then underneath it all the aspects relative to architecture, controls, and operations are documented in our processes as well. So it complements the idea of taking that view, but part of it is the medical device product comes with a boatload of documentation that also supports truth points, and we bring that forward in terms of our deliverables, because obviously being a platform that works with medical devices, it's not just about building, it's about deploying and running and up to the standards that are being asked.
Daniel, maybe John, just to add to that BioT is a platform, because there was a question about pre-validation. Yeah. So at least on the cloud side, BioT provides also the SBOM documentations and vulnerability assessment on that part and the risk management. So the cloud part is covered and you don't need to manage it. You still need to manage, of course, the device side and the software that you have that runs on the device. But on the cloud side, we are covering all the relevant aspects. That includes also penetration tests that we are conducting and compliance with regulations or standards like SOC 2 and HITRUST, which provide a wider protection on top of the vulnerabilities that relate to the SBOM itself.
And same is true also then on the Helm side, right? It's a fully validated tool. We can provide documentation to support that. And even if you would build your own tool based on, pick a name, Excel spreadsheets or something, you would still need to validate that, make sure that it meets FDA quality system requirements. And again, by using a commercial tool such as Helm, we can help you with that, and we can basically provide that documentation to you.
Yeah, and we can follow up with the person who asked the question. We have in our BioT docs, we have everything associated with what's in our DHF, the tasks associated with it. We've also aligned all of our deliverables with the 510K, the eSTAR process, to simplify how you actually go through that. But hopefully that answers the question that was asked from the field. Okay. Just looking to see if there's any other questions from the field. We'll give everyone a minute. Otherwise, we'll actually give you back a little time. So while we're doing that, so on the webinar site, you'll see both of us obviously have a website. We'll give you very information, but we're also here to help. If you've got questions relative to it, just drop us a note. Obviously, it's info@biot-med or info@medcrypt. We'll definitely rally to it. As we talked about, we'll send these slides out for those to have access to it who registered for the event. But we're also more than willing to sort of roll up our sleeves and explain things even further. So the aspect there that we have, we definitely do that. There's one question actually while I was doing that came in. What have you seen in terms of FDA enforcement around vulnerability management? I guess, Axel, do you have any perspective on that?
Well, I touched on that in the beginning, right? We saw FDA's initial steps on cybersecurity all the way back to 2014, and we have seen FDA continually raising their bar, not only in their cybersecurity guidance document, including the last update from yesterday, actually, of the pre-market guidance being updated. But also we've seen the enforcement going up, right? We see more and more of our customers getting pushback from FDA on a range of cybersecurity topics, including documentation, including their processes, including the data provided for cybersecurity testing and so forth. So clearly the FDA is building a cybersecurity team. The FDA is training their team, and that team of reviewers is now starting to push back on manufacturers increasingly if they disagree with a given cybersecurity topic.
Yeah. Anyone else have any other thing to add there? Yeah, I think the other thing, just to complement what's coming back specifically on the FDA, is the biggest variable is you've typically tuned your organization to operate with some variable of, okay, we need to drop everything and take care of this. The reality is when that list gets long, it gets very hard. So the idea of trying to have ways that you can do this proactively, determine if you have to execute, you execute quickly and efficiently, is part of what we're trying to do. And also is building on top of platforms, back to even the earlier question about validation and documentation, building on top of this, because obviously you can go at this alone and try to do it manually. But as Ohm said in the earlier process, it introduces a number of things relative to not only risk, but time, or really a focus of the organization on really what's your broader goal, which is to help patients, help clinicians, and ultimately build a business. So hopefully the webinar today peeked a little bit into this topic. We'll have others on that. Once again, we'll send out the webinar recording and slides, but we're more than willing to jump in to go into greater detail with it. So with that being said, if I don't think we have any other questions, we can give everybody back a little bit of time to grab a little time based on where they're at in the world, and we'll pick it up next time. So thank you very much for attending, everyone. Goodbye.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.